P5, Factoring Polynomials, Day 2. Your learning goal is that you will be able to write functions in equivalent forms and graph functions with and without technology. So we're going to be going over different ways or special ways of factoring. We're going to start off with difference of squares. So example 1a, we have x squared minus 144. And all of these are different, so you're going to see minus or subtract. And so basically you square root x squared, which would be x and x, and you square root 144, which is 12. But one has to be positive and one has to be negative. B, 64x squared minus 81. Even if you have a leading coefficient, it should be a perfect square. And you square root both terms. So you'll have square root of 64 is 8, so it's 8x and 8x. Square root of 81 is 9. One has to be positive and one has to be negative. And then C, 81x to the fourth minus 1. So you square root both terms. You have 9x squared plus 1 and 9x squared minus 1. If you're going to notice, this is also a difference of squares. So we can go further. I'm going to bring down my first factor. And this will be square root of 9x squared is 3x. And 1 is plus 1, and 1 is minus 1. So that is your factoring by difference of squares. Example 2, we're going to look at perfect square trinomials. And that just means that when we factor these terms, they come out to be a perfect square. So for example A, we have x squared plus 4x plus 4. So what we have to do is figure out what number can I double to get 4, but if I square it, I get 4. So this is double square. And the only number that works is 2. So that's x plus 2 squared. Or you can write it twice. B, even if there's a minus, it'll just be x minus something squared. And that number would have to be 5. Because if you double negative 5, you get negative 10. But if you square it, you get 25. And even there, for C, if there's a number in front, you square root both of them. So this will be 8x minus 1. Because if you double 8x, you get negative 16x. And if you double square negative 1, you get 1. Or you can always write it twice. Example 3, we're going to factor using the formula for sum of difference of cubes. And we're going to use what is called SOPs. S-O-P-S. And this acronym helps us when we are factoring cubes. And these are perfect cubes. The cube root of x cubed is x. And the cube root of 64 is 4. So you keep your sign. So the first S stands for square the first term. So this is my first term. This is my second term. So squaring the first term would give us x squared. Then the O stands for opposite sign. So our sign started off positive, now it's negative. The P stands for product, so you're multiplying the x and the 4, which would be 4x. And the last S stands for square the last term or the second term, and that is 4. So 4 squared is 16. So square, opposite, product, square. Let's try another one. 27x cubed minus 1. So I usually call this, I have my short bus and my long bus. And then the short bus is when you're going to cube root the two terms. So even if you have a leading coefficient, you still cube root it. And that will give us 3x minus cube root of 1 is just 1. All right, remember, this is your first term. This is your second. So we're going to use SOPs in the long bus. So you're going to square your first term, which will be 9x squared. Opposite sign. So instead of minus, it'll be plus. Product. 3x times 1 is 3x. Square your second term. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. Example 4, we're going to factor each term completely or state that it is prime. Prime means that there are no common factors. And you can't factor it. Or you can't factor it. So let's look at A. 5x cubed minus 45x. First thing you want to always look for is that GCF. So they both have a 5x in common. So I'm going to divide both by 5x. The 5's divide evenly, so I'm left with x squared. The x's divide evenly, minus 9. Then this is difference of squares. Difference of squares. So I have to go further and make that x minus 3, x plus 3. And that's factored completely. B. 6x squared minus 18x minus 60. Look for that GCF, which in this case is 6. And if I divide each one, I'll get x squared minus 3x minus 10. Now this can go further. And if it can't, you would leave it. Two numbers that multiply to give you negative 10, that add to give you negative 3. Negative 5 and positive 2. And now that's factored completely. And then C. 7x to the 4th minus 7. Look for your GCF. X to the 4th minus 1. Here's our difference of squares. So we get x squared plus 1, x squared minus 1. Here's another difference of squares. And now you have factored it completely.